everybody. Welcome back. YouTube.com/Geek Aloud. It's Thursday night. It's 8 p.m. So, of course, on Geek Aloud here, we have the Gaming Enforcement Agency. Bully, sir, you've been promoted to that there second slot. How are you this evening?
I am doing very well, mate. Glad to be back after we missed last week, unfortunately, due to some work commitments, but we're good to go now.
Excellent. Shout out to Ace. Thank you for filling in last week, buddy. Now, all the fine viewers out there, let me tell you exactly how the show runs. First up, we have games, interrogation, and deliberation. It is the four games Bully and myself have played throughout the week. You're going to see, on that side, the footage of us playing. We'll discuss it in depth and in detail. Any questions or comments, bang them in that live YouTube chat as we go. We'll get to them. Then segment 2, is the news segment. Bully, I understand you've been flat out kicking in newsroom doors, mate. How many stories have you been able to round up for us?
We certainly have. We've got a full house tonight, 8 stories to run through for this evening.
That sounds like a new high score. Unky Dunky, lift your socks up for next week on your glorious return, mate. Try and beat 8 news stories. And then, of course, segment 3, everyone's favourite segment. Shout out to Unky Dunky for helping us last minute scramble for tonight's standoff. So we put the best of video gaming up against the other best of video gaming. And you in the audience, please comment in your votes as we go. We'll tally them up and work it all out at the end. But, Bully, what can you tell us about this evening's standoff?
Well, this evening's standoff. So we have had, and we'll probably give it away here, but the first game we're going to talk about is Disney's Illusion Island, which was out this week, released on the Nintendo Switch. So we are asking, what is the best Disney video game?
Indeed. So if you've played a Disney video game out there, you've got an opinion, make sure you bang it in the chat. And then finally, it is segment 4, which is audience integration. Now, Bully, all evening, as we've just invited people to, hopefully we've got some comments streaming into the YouTube chat. If you're willing to, sir, I'd love it if you could go on patrol all evening, flick out any comments. And should you miss any, segment 4 is we'll round them up at the end. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Perfect. In that case, let's kick on to games, interrogation, and deliberation. First up this evening, Bully, it's over to you for Disney's Illusion Island.
Illusion Island from Disney, and I did give it away with the intro there, but released for the Nintendo Switch, last Friday, I think it was. So about 6 days ago. And you can see on the screen there the art style. It's got very retro Disney style art. So one of the things that stood out to me very quickly was it was almost like the old 1930s style Mickey, but sort of rehashed or redone for the modern era. And the biggest giveaway is all the characters. So Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy, they've all got white faces, which they don't generally have that black and white aesthetic in any of the newer cartoons. But
it certainly helps them pop out during the gameplay, though. I love the aesthetic choice.
Yeah, it does. And it ties in with some of the other characters and stuff that they've got in the game as well. And then because as you can see on the screen there, there's quite a lot going on in the backgrounds as well. So there's quite a lot of color and a lot of pop. So having that sort of almost black and white cell, it's almost like a cell shading off color to separate itself from the background.
Yeah,
makes your character stand out really well. And then you might be able to see on the screen as you're moving around there as well, there's actually, some color trails that will come out behind your character as you're moving around. So one of the first abilities that you get is in effect an ability to, it's not a double jump, but it's almost like a glide. And when you do that glide, you have like a shot of color bouncing out the back of the whichever of the characters you're choosing. And you can use any of the 4 as you're playing along.
So in terms of say there's 4-player co-op?
Well, you can do co-op, or if you're doing single player, you can just do it as you choose which character you want to play. So,
and sorry, is it exclusively on Switch now, or where are you playing this?
On the Switch, yeah. So I don't believe it's been released for any other consoles or PC at the moment. It's only on Nintendo Switch, which I find sort of surprising for a a Disney licensed game, that it's only on one console, because generally they like to spread it around and get as much money as they can. And I would have thought, obviously the Switch has got a pretty big install base console-wise, but I would have thought that this would have been right up there to throw it over to the Xbox and PlayStation consoles. You get a wider audience.
Yeah, just looking at the splash screen there, mate, I see it's D.E.A Studios. Now, I've never heard of these guys, so off the top of my head, I'm wondering, are these guys only familiar with the Switch and maybe they went with that studio and that was where they released it first? Maybe the ports are coming. Do you know anything about the developers?
No, I'm the same. I've never heard of them either. So I don't know just the name itself, and I hadn't had a chance to look it up. But by the look of it, it almost sounded like a Disney studio, like an in-house studio. So
Yeah, okay.
it may well be that they've got some sort of agreement with Nintendo, whether it's an exclusive ongoing for the console, or whether it's just a timed exclusive or whatever it is. But look, in terms of the gameplay, when it was initially revealed and announced, and a few people had sort of gone hands-on with it, and the description that came across fairly regularly was it was like a Disney-style Metroidvania, which it is to some degree. So there's a lot of backtracking. You get extra abilities as you're going through. So I'm probably 4 or 5 hours in. After about the first hour, you get your first ability, which is that gliding skill. Yep. And then you get, I think after about another hour and a half or so, you then get your next ability, which is to be able to jump off walls. So you can sort of make your way up, standard platforming style skills bouncing off walls. But you've got to sort of unlock those as you go. And there's in the vein of the standard Metroidvanias, you can bring up a map and you can see all these different areas that you can get to, and then there's certain sections you can't get to because you don't have the ability unlocked yet, and that sort of stuff. So in that respect, it very much is a Metroidvania game, but it's this is probably the best way I can describe it, and this is not being critical of the game at all, but I'd almost describe it as like your kid's first Metroidvania. So it's not, you won't find yourself getting lost and having to do these massive backtracking areas to unlock things. You can pretty much work your way through. A lot of the areas that you haven't been able to access with those skills are merely for collectibles and those sort of things. So it's not inherent to the story that you unlock the skills and then spend hours backtracking and unlocking new areas. Well, it's certainly, I haven't got to that point in the first 4 or 5 hours, as I said. So it's not as in depth as what you'd normally expect. But having said all that, I'm really enjoying it. It's almost a mix between that Metroidvania style and just a standard platformer.
Yep.
And we don't get a lot of 2D platformers these days. So to have one in that style, and I always love the Disney cartoons and the characters and all that. So you sort of mix those in together, and I'm really enjoying it. It's relatively forgiving in terms of its platforming skills. So you might even be all right with it, Troy.
That was exactly my next question. How forgiving is it?
It is.
On death, how far back are you going?
Oh, so you unlock these sort of post box things, which are like your checkpoints, and I think the furthest I've had to backtrack is maybe a minute or so of gameplay. Yeah, so they're fairly well spaced, and there's a lot of them around, so you won't find yourself having to go back too far.
And if I played it and got stuck, is there online multiplayer? Could I rope you in to beat a boss challenge or something?
I haven't had a look to see if there's online multiplayer, but the 2 bosses that I've beaten so far, like they're not a walk in the park, but they're not Dark Souls. Yeah, you're not going to be belting your head against the wall for hours on end trying to get past it. It might be, and depending on the level you've got. So your hardest level, you have 1 heart, so basically 1 hit and you're dead. Your standard normal level, you have 2 hearts, and for an easy mode, you have 3 hearts. So that's how they differentiate the challenge. It doesn't make the bosses harder or anything like that. It just means you've got more hits that you can take before you die. So I'm just running it on normal at the moment. So 2 hearts. I think the first boss I died once and then came back, worked it out, and was straight through after that.
Have they lifted like a Nibbit type character from the Donkey Kong platformers where you can just walk across the spikes and you'll never fall to your death?
No, I haven't. Well, I've only really used Mickey, so I haven't used any of the other characters, but I don't think there's any of that cheat style a la Mario Bros.
Very good. And where's it sitting for you, mate? Is it up there with platformers? Can you see yourself going through and finishing it? Is it a gripping story?
Oh, look, the story isn't edge of your seat riveting. It's probably enough just to give it a base to give you some motivation to work through it. But in terms of a platformer, like as I said, it's relatively forgiving and it's pretty. There's some platformers you can do. If you miss one jump, you basically end your run. But this one, because you've got a couple of different abilities that you unlock, if you miss a jump, you can sort of glide or you can bounce off a wall or do something like that sort of keeps you going, and it won't necessarily you miss one platform and you're dead.
Yep.
And it's sort of strange in some way to describe the way that it's sort of set up. So it's not in screen by screen. So you do one screen and then it sort of slides across and loads up to the next screen. And I shouldn't say load because it just goes straight across, but it sort of zooms in, zooms out. It's like one big sort of open area, but it'll zoom in, zoom out, and it gives the effect of you're just moving from room to room, even though you're not.
Yep.
And within those rooms, there's, if you fall off a platform, you're just going to drop down to the floor, and then you can just make your way back up. So pretty forgiving, I think. Am I going to go and play through it all? I think I will. I'm enjoying it. As I said, it's pretty rare these days to get a decent quality 2D platformer.
Well, the last one I can think of would be Cuphead. And what was that, 2017, I want to say?
I don't even know if I'd say that's like a true 2D platformer as such, because it's brutally difficult, especially with some of those some of those bosses and stuff you get to. But oh no, I did struggle with that one as well. But as I said, I'm really enjoying it. I'll play through it. I think it's got enough there. Like, it's challenging enough for someone who's been playing games for a long time, but without being too challenging that you couldn't throw it to the kids and they would have a good time with it as well. So at this stage, I'd probably give it about a 7, which is, nice. It's probably a bit higher the middle of the range at the moment, but it'd just be a matter of seeing what other abilities you unlock and that with these sort of games, that's where the fun is to a large degrees. It's the abilities that you unlock, and then that expands and extends the gameplay out. So that the more you sort of work through, and as I said, I think I've unlocked 2 or 3 abilities at the moment. So I just looking at some of the areas that I can't get to yet, I'd say there's probably another 3 or 4 to unlock.
Yeah, right. And where does it sit price-wise? Is it full price for a Switch game?
No, I think it was a bit cheaper. I think it was about the 60-ish 60 Australian mark. So that'd be
$3.80 US.
Yeah, it'd probably be about the 40. So mid price, I'd say, which is for a Switch game, and especially the first parties, they never go down. So the fact that you're getting something that's a pretty high quality for a bit cheaper, I think is pretty good as well.
Yeah, nice. Final question from me. I believe, knowing your history, you'd be playing this in docked mode. So are you using the Pro controller or what do you call it, Joy-Con?
No, I use a Pro controller with it docked. So I don't know. I don't think I've actually used the Joy-Cons in that holder since the original Breath of the Wild. I think that was the first game I got on the Switch and used that, and then quickly went out and got myself a Pro controller. I don't think I've ever used the Joy-Cons in probably 4 or 5 years, I wouldn't have thought.
No left stick drift for you then. You're under control.
Correct.
I love it. I've got no final points, so if you don't mind, let's kick on to, shall we?
Let's move along.
All right, next up is me, and it's Double Dragon Gaiden, Rise of the Dragons. Now, I had no idea this game existed until last week's G.E.A, where we did the games coming out this week. So after the show, I went out and dropped, I think it was 35 or 37 Australian dollars on the Xbox store to pick this up. And of course, it works beautifully with the arcade stick. If you want to see the install and the arcade stick working, that's available back on the channel. And I'm not sure what your history is with Double Dragon Bully, but I got to tell you, for me, old school fan, this lit me up nostalgia-wise, left, right, and center. It is exactly what you want. There's enough of the old stuff in there that you're like, yes, this is 100% Double Dragon, but then they've got some more of the modern trappings. They've got, a store, and at the end of the rounds, there's little various bonuses, so you're collecting cash through the level, and then you've got random abilities come up, and you pick one of the 5, I believe it is, random abilities to purchase at the end. And then they've got a meta game of you can get like little poker chips, and you can cash in, I think it's 2 or 3 poker chips for a continue, or in the main menu, there's also a store available that you can unlock, extra characters, artwork, extra soundtracks, all that sort of stuff. So this is a complete package, and I think for $35 to $37 Australian, if you liked Double Dragon back in the day, man, you are crazy not to pick this up. What is your history with Double Dragon, Billy?
Oh, I think the original one I played was the old Sega Master System.
Okay.
I had it, the old, well, I don't know, it wasn't a Blockbuster back then. It was, your local video game store, unnamed, or, some generic name that you used to go down and borrow it from. So what's that, probably 35 years ago, I think, for the old Master System. I really enjoyed that. It got brutally difficult towards the end. I remember playing through the first 2 or 3 levels each time, and then once you sort of got a bit further than that, it became extremely difficult. So I don't know how the difficulty goes with this, but I was sort of with you. I didn't realise it was coming out, and I've jumped on and ordered it online, but it has to come from overseas. So
physical collector, of course.
Yeah, so they've given me a 2 or 3 week wait for the shipping from overseas. So I can't wait to get into it. But that's as you know, my preference. I can't. I have to load a disc up. I can't just download.
Fair enough, mate. And it's a beautiful collection you've got. Now, was there an Amazon story you wanted to share on air, or was that one just quiet?
Well, this is through Amazon, I suppose. So at least I've been able to get it, because I couldn't find any Australian retailers that were selling it. So
yeah, right. That was the same as the Cowabunga collection. Was that never physically released in Australia? You had to get that on OS as well.
No, what was the other one that came out? Shredder's Revenge. So I think they ended up.
That's what I meant. Yeah,
they ended up releasing that pretty widely, including Australia. But I think at the time I ordered it through limited run games, that the indication was that was the only way you'd be able to get a physical version. Well, as it turned out, they released a physical version in Australia, and as I said, pretty widely around the world. And then limited run games with their. I think it's the one and only time I've ever bought anything from it. I don't think I'll go back to them because of the outrageous postage time. So I ordered it when it came out in whenever it was, June or July last year. It didn't ship until January, and I don't think I got it until late January, early February this year, the actual physical version of it.
Yeah, fair enough. I think coming up here in a second on the footage, I just want to put this out now. I briefly mentioned that there's like this poker chip system and you can convert them in, but check this out. I managed to glitch the game right here. You got to watch this footage. So I've died and I let the countdown go to 0. Even though I've got the cash there, I could have pushed and hold A to revive, but wrap your head around this, see if you can see this, bully. So I've died. And then if you go there and select cash out and delete progress, see there, and then watch what happens here. It deletes my game because it carries over. But watch what happens at the top here, Billy. Right at the top of the screen, after you delete it and you come back in. Now loading. Look at this for an error that they're going to have to patch out. Boom, 999 tokens. They maxed out my tokens. So I immediately went into the token shop and then unlocked everything. And it was achievements galore. I got 3 different achievements for unlocking all the characters, all the tips, and all this just off a glitch. So my advice to you, as soon as you get it, bully, die.
Well, don't make it so widely known that they patch it out before I get it in a couple of weeks.
Just let yourself die, let the countdown go, and then delete it. And you come back to the main menu, you got 999 tokens, and then just unlock everything in the token shop. And look at that. Boom. What is it? 280 achievement points in less than a minute. Thank you very much. Oh, the other big thing I want to shout out in this game is, now, Bully, I don't know if you recall, I've got a feeling we told this story before you joined us. What was that? Ep33 of the Gaming Enforcement Agency. But back in the day, playing Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, I forever was quoting the line, "Hey, yo, CJ." It was, those classic video games that get stuck in your head, the game lines, I should say. I want to say this game is full of them. There is 100 different lines in this game that, you pull a different move off or whatever, and there's a different shout-out line. And this game is just old school nostalgia from that point as well. They've just cashed in on the memorable, like, one-liners, and then when the bosses come in, there's cool animations and, like, old school voiceovers and stuff. So this game's tickled me pink. This so far this year, and I'm not saying it's a 10, it's nowhere near Vampire Survivors. I'm not saying that at all, but it is for me leading the charge for the best indie game of the year thus far. This, for me, hands down, best indie game of the year so far. Sitting, 885, I'd say easy. If you're an old school Double Dragon fan, I say pick this one up. No question. Speaking of questions, any from you, Billy, or should we move on?
Well, I was just going to say it's probably refreshing because quite often we get the remakes of 80s or 90s, classic games in the Double Dragon vein, and it doesn't quite hit the mark, or they try too hard, or it's a bit over the top. So the fact that it's hitting all those marks for you, and it's got that nostalgia bug with obviously what I assume is a better gameplay quality and certainly better graphical quality.
Yep.
I can't wait to go hands on with it.
Oh, yeah, and silky smooth 60 frames a second. I love it. All right. Game 3 this evening. Now, this one's over to you, Bully, and we have to thank the developers for sending the code in for the install, which is available on the channel, but this is Tin Hearts. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, so I've jumped in and probably put a couple of hours into it. It's probably the best way to describe it is like a 3D Lemmings to a degree, but it takes that puzzle element probably a little bit further. So whereas with Lemmings, you've basically got down one side of the screen a bunch of actions that you can make each lemming take, for those that remember that game.
Oh, yes.
You can stop them you can make one stop and push them all back, or you can give them all parachutes to make sure that they land long jumps and all that sort of stuff. In this one, though, you play basically as a toy maker, and you have these tin soldiers that will come out of a box, and you've got to get them to a doorway on another side of a table or the other side of the room. And you can see on the screen there, you've got a couple of blocks that you can use, and they can only each block has got a certain pattern on it, and it's almost like the kids' toys of the square block in the square hole and the triangle block in the triangle hole.
Yep.
So each block that you can use can only fit on a particular on a particular set that then would direct where the tin soldiers go, and then you've got to sort of direct them around the screen that way. And that's sort of how it starts out. But at the more you play it, the more it gives you a bit more freedom and a bit more access. So whereas the first couple of levels while you're going through the tutorial and sort of learning it, you get 3 or 4 blocks that have to go in a certain space, and you really can't muck it up too much. What ends up happening is that they will give you free-form blocks, so you can put them anywhere on the table or anywhere around the room to then start directing them. And then there's occasions where you won't have enough, so you'll have to backtrack. Once they've gone through a particular section, you'll have to backtrack, quickly grab the block, set it up, and move it for the next section. But it does actually have, if you struggle with the pace of it, it does have a rewind feature, so you can rewind the soldiers to go back, and it also has a pause feature as well. So you can set up the track they're going to go, and it has quite an interesting feature in it. So because you're in that 3D space, and sometimes when you're working in that space in a video game, it's a bit hard to sort of see exactly where they're going to go and line them up and all that sort of thing. When you're in the pause section, it actually gives you the track that they are going to take based on all the blocks that you've set up.
Oh, that's cool.
And you can sort of, grab a block and sort of fine tune exactly where you want it to go so that they hit the next mark or the next area that you need them to go to. So it gives you that as well. You don't have to use it, but it certainly makes it a lot easier, especially you can see on screen now, it's one tabletop that you're working on. Well, the more you play, the bigger it gets. So there's one level I played just before we came on air, and you're basically going from one side of a big room to the other side of the big room, and you've got to go across multiple tables. There's like a drum on the ground that they will bounce off. They'll bounce off the skin of the drum, so they'll fall off the table, bounce off that, and then it'll bounce them up to another table or another walkway or whatever it is. So you've got to, because you're working in that in what is a fairly big space and a fair amount of margin for error, it's really good to have that line of where they're going. It does help, and it expands out on the puzzle after that. So as I said, it starts off pretty easy. You can only sort of really put the blocks in one certain area. Once you get into that freeform bit, and then you start unlocking other abilities that you can move other items within each room. So I've just got up to a bit where you can move. There's a wooden train set, and you need to manipulate the wooden train set around, and then use the angles of the train set to direct the toy soldiers or the tin soldiers as well. So
is that to say, sorry, are they getting on board the train and then moving, or are they just sort of bouncing off the train?
No, they just sort of bounce off it. So the same as they do with the blocks, they just sort of bounce off it and you direct them, but you can bounce them off the train and then sort of move it along a little bit further, and then they'll bounce off that section to the part where you need them to get to. So it's interesting. I don't know how much longer I'll stick with it, but it's quite charming as well. It's got a bit of a story that sort of plays. It's almost like a memory sequence as you're working through it. So you'll have voiceovers of, as I said, you play basically a toy maker, and there's a voiceover of what I'm assuming is a bigger toy company that says, "Hey, you know, it'd be great if you came along and showed us what you've done and this sort of stuff." And then there's other sections where what I assume is your daughter is playing around, and just some of the memories that go along with that as well. So it does have that story. It's got some really nice, relaxing music to it as well. So it's not really big upbeat, but it's just got that nice, relaxing music, and that's probably the best way to describe the game. It's got a bit of puzzle element to it, but it's not that hectic that you're sort of sitting there, you know, stressing about different sections, because it's got that rewind feature and it's got that nice, relaxing music.
I found it almost like a Zen type game. It is a puzzle game, but there's no imminent pressure. There's no imminent threat. It's very chill.
Yeah, and the only thing, which I haven't had a great look at, but I certainly, when I was flicking around on the home screen, is it a VR game? Because I think this would be right up the VR alley, but it only seems to be able to do it just on the standard TV screen.
I agree. It would be a fantastic VR game. And yeah, to my knowledge, it is not VR enabled, but I agree completely, man. I had the exact same thought when playing. I'm like, geez, this would do well in the old PSVR too.
Yeah, and I find it funny because that's sort of once you get into it and the viewpoint that you've got with how it all sort of plays out, and you can see that on the screen. I just would have assumed that it would have had a VR. So
yeah,
you know, maybe that's something they're working out on down the track, but I think that probably would have been a pretty good selling point for them.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you've looked into it, man, and my memory's a bit rusty, but I believe this came out originally to the Switch, and I think it was a few years ago, like 2, 3, maybe even 4 years ago, and then it's only made the jump over to the PlayStation within the last month, I think.
Yeah, no, I haven't had. I think I mentioned it to you when you messaged me about it the other day. I'd never heard of it and never seen anything of it, so was happy to jump in and have a look at it. And as I said, I'm not sure how much more I'll play, but it's certainly it's one of those games when if you're sort of playing some action heavy games or some really heavy story games that you just want to have a bit of a break from and just a bit of a relax, maybe before you go to bed, or when you got 5 or 10 minutes spare just to work through one. Well, each level is a room essentially. It's probably the best way to describe it. So you can jump in and do a room within sort of 10 or 15 minutes. So if you've just got a little bit of spare time, you just jump into it, you do a room, and then you sort of move on, and you're not missing out in terms of, if you're jumping in and jumping out all the time, you're not missing out and sort of going, oh, where was I up to? What's going on with the story? How do I do this? How do I do this? It's sort of all pretty straightforward. So.
Yeah, I agree completely, man. If you'd spent, maybe a good couple of hours tucked into Call of Duty or something, and then just before bed, jump in, I couldn't agree more, man. Perfect palate cleanser. As I said, really relaxing, really calming, nice chill music. It's the perfect thing to play for, round or two before bed. Couldn't agree more, man. For me, indie game, I'd sit it at about a 6.5 or a 7 thus far. I enjoyed my time with it, but if it was in PSVR 2, it would be sitting up at an 8.5 for me. That experience would absolutely make me want to play it through to the end. As it sits now, though, 6.5 or a 7. How about yourself?
Yeah, probably about the same. About a 6, I'd say, for me, and 100% with you on that. As we've mentioned, I don't know why it's not in VR. I can only hope that at some point down the track they convert it into a VR or have a free VR update, because I think it's just begging for it with the viewpoint and the control system and how it all sort of plays out and it's put together.
Yeah, agree completely. All right, man, fantastic stuff there. Tin Hearts, once again, thank you to the developers. I'm blanking. Was it Wired? So Wired Productions, I want to say, with the developers of Tin Hearts. Anyway, thank you to those guys for supplying the key. Much appreciated. Game 4 is Debris Infinity. Now, Bully, I don't know your history, man. Were you a Geometry Wars player back in the day on, what was that, Xbox 360?
Never played Geometry Wars.
Woo! Well, have a look at the screen here, because this is Geometry Wars 3.5, I would argue. They've taken that very basic Geometry Wars formula, and then they've just upped it. They've added systems, they've added shields, they've added all these like there were multipliers originally, but the way multipliers are done here with the visual, and you know me, man, I love a good bit of flashing light and color. So the way they've done the shields on the side bouncing up and down just lights up that part of my head, and I absolutely love it. And a big shout out, my favorite feature that they've had, because I'm a huge Geometry Wars fan, no question in my mind, that was a 10 out of 10 back in the day. But the extra cool thing they've added here in Debris Infinity is at the end, I'm not even sure if I included it, I should have, but at the end of the mission or the round, they show you a heat map. So it says like, this was like the broad postage stamp of where you were, and then it's everywhere you went on there, and it just shows you the gameplay. But it's really helpful. I find it's quite informative, because when I started playing, I didn't realize I only ever hung around the bottom of the map. But when I saw that heat map, I'm like, shit, I've spent all my time in the bottom, like 25% of the map. And so after seeing that, I deliberately forced myself to spread out my gameplay more. But then my scores like shot through the roof once I did that. So it's only their ingenious inclusion of this sort of heat map where you played that's enabled me to improve my skills in it. So I am a big fan of this game. Oh, once again, it is another one where I had the old arcade stick working, so my old man hands weren't punished by it. Fantastic game, very enjoyable. If you like Geometry Wars, definitely check it out. They've got sort of the standard mode or normal mode, which is what you're looking at now, and then there's two other modes. One of them is a time attack mode, and I'm totally blanking on the other one. Oh, here we go. Here's the death. Game over. Do we see the heat map? No. Power wave. Sorry, that was the third one. So, yeah, 3 different game modes. They've got the online leaderboard, so you always see, like, this was your score and this is where you sit, globally, or for your country, I think you can filter by, maybe by friends as well. But, arcade, single stick shooter, lot of fun. If you're into arcade games, obviously I am. I love it. So this is me down to the ground. As far as Geometry Wars clones go, they have absolutely nailed it. I'd set this game at an easy 8. And I think, as I said, they provided the code, and thank you very much for supplying the code, but I think this game's a $7 pickup. So if it's at all an inkling towards you, highly recommend this one. If you like your Geometry Wars, I say for $7, you're crazy if you don't pick it up. I was playing this on Xbox. It played flawlessly. I believe it's also available on PlayStation. Bully, any questions?
I suppose the only thing is the music-wise, how does the music go with it? Because it's to me, it looks very much like, or it's got a lot of the effects that Tetris Effect had, like that dark background, and then just the explosions and the light and all that sort of stuff. So does the music or the background music sort of keep time with that sort of stuff in the way that Tetris does?
No, it's not as in sync with Tetris as what you're saying, but I would just categorize the music as EDM. It's dance music, techno, and you're off.
Well, maybe if they bring out a country and western soundtrack to go with it, I might be into it for them.
I'd love it. A big reskin of the game, make you a little cowboy in the middle, and maybe you shooting at your cattle and country and western. I could see you down to the ground. But as I said, about $7. Online leaderboards. I don't know now. I feel like there is local multiplayer. I feel like there's a 1-player, 2-player option, but I didn't touch it at all. But for me, if you love Geometry Wars, definitely check this one out. As I said, available on both consoles. But that is it for Games, Interrogation, and Deliberation for this evening, which only means one thing. Bully, get that foot and leg ready. It's time to kick in a newsroom door. Here we go. Now, Bully, who has the right to remain newsworthy this evening, sir?
Well, as we mentioned off the top, we got 8 news stories that have popped up this week, and we'll start with the first one, which was a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't see this one coming, but spiritual successor for Patapon, which was obviously a PlayStation 1 game, but Ratatan.
Hold on, mate. I've got that as story 4. I'm showing on screen currently Star Wars Jedi Survivor coming to PS4 and Xbox One.
Oh, my bad. I've knocked myself out there. Yes, Jedi Survivor coming to PS4 and Xbox. I'm a bit surprised by this, to be honest with you. I am a big fan of breaking off consoles in terms of we have a new one released. Yes, we normally have a 12 or 18 month window where we have a bit of crossover.
36 months is a bit ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think I've said for a long time that we're well past the point of trying to accommodate for the previous gen consoles. Now, I understand that it's going to be a business decision in this case because, the console availability on the PS4 and the Xbox, it'd be, combined would be somewhere around 170 to 180 million. Whereas if you're talking about the PS5 and Xbox, you're looking at 60 to 70 million or thereabouts is sort of where they're sitting at the moment. So quite clearly, if you've got triple the audience to be able to sell to, it's a business decision. I understand that. But the flip side of it is that you are then having to go back in and put more work into it and more effort into, bringing down frame rates, redoing graphical fidelity down to a lower standard.
And think about all the open world maps. They're going to have to cut those in half. They're going to have to somehow insert loading screens halfway through the open world sections. I can't even imagine what they're going to do there.
Yeah, so a bit of a strange decision because, yes, you'll probably make some money out of it. And it being a Star Wars franchise, I'd imagine you make a fair bit of money out of it, putting it back on the last gen consoles. But obviously they've got the base there; they just have to, in effect, detune it to some degree. So in this circumstance, as I said, I sort of understand it, but I think it really we just need to move on, and that's probably one of the things in my mind that's holding back to some degree the console sales. And yes, we had issues with availability early on, but that's sort of been for at least 12 or 18 months. We're past that. They're regularly available. If you want one, you can go and get one. Really, I think that if there was developers just saying, no, it is only a current gen or next gen, however you want to phrase it, release, it's going to sell current consoles. People are going to go out and buy them. That's just a fact of life. So, and the more you do that, the bigger the pool of current gen becomes, and the more viable it is to just release things onto current gen consoles. And I mean, the reality is, I saw a story during the week that I think the next consoles like PS6 and whatever Xbox call their next console, they're sort of looking at 2028. I think was what they were sort of indicating. So we're getting close to the halfway point of the life cycle of this console, and we're still getting last gen games. I don't understand it.
I don't either. What I'm shocked by, mate, is where's their Wii U port?
Well, actually, it's funny you mentioned the Wii U because they did shut down all the servers and the Nintendo eShop. I actually saw during the week that they're reopening or restarting the servers for, I think it was Splatoon, and there was one other game I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're actually reopening two of the servers for the old Wii U console. So,
wow,
who knows? Maybe you might get a Jedi Survivor Wii U edition.
Wild guess here, man. Is it anything to do with the Activision acquisition? Like, are they two Activision games? I don't even know who did Splatoon. No, that was internal Nintendo.
Yes,
wasn't it?
yeah, Splatoon's a Nintendo game. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why they've gone back to it.
Crazy.
But they have. So, there you go.
They've announced it. And they're aiming for Q1 2024, Bully. So, it'll be even longer in the tooth. This is a crazy story. I'm shocked, surprised, and I'm also moving on. Story 2 this evening. Oh, look out. What's going on here, Bully? Tell us things.
Well, it's something I'll probably never move on to, and that's, I know you have, Troy, beaten Elden Ring and got them platinum on it. I didn't get anywhere near it. But having said that, we have had a player that has, without taking a hit and using a saxophone, has beaten Elden Ring. They have previously beaten Bloodborne and Dark Souls with the same instrument. So obviously, I've seen plenty of different versions of how people have done this. They've used, dance mats. They've used Guitar Hero controllers and all the rest of it. And I struggle just with a standing controller, and you've got people doing this. So, hats off to you if you can do it. But I like to experience a wide range of games. I'd imagine that you'd have to put a fair amount of time and effort into basically memorizing that whole game and how it works and how each individual enemy attacks and all the rest of it, especially to be able to do it with no hits. So good luck to you, but I'm not spending that amount of time in it.
Indeed, top effort, whoever it was. Well played, sir. I declare you to be the hashtag real gamer. You can take it from me for the platinum.
Great well, it was Dr. Decomposing is the gentleman there that was doing it. It's on his Twitch channel there.
There you go, Dr. Decomposing. Hats off to you, sir. Well played. Excellent work. All right, story 3 this evening. What's going on? Remnant 2, Billy.
Remnant 2. So Gunfire Games, obviously the second one being number 2. In 4 days, they have sold 1 million copies, which having a look at it, I don't think the original, I think that took over 12 months to sell that amount of copies. And they've done it in 4 days. Not sure if you've gone hands-on with it, Troy, but I'll probably put about 5 or 6 hours into it. We'll wait for a good rundown next week when Unky joins us back. But certainly, I know he's put about 30 to 40 hours into it, so he can give us a fairly good rundown. Although I will give him a bit of a clip across the ears because I went out and bought it based on his recommendation. And as I said, 4 or 5 hours into it, and I've put it down. I'm not sure I'll be going back and spending much more time into it.
I know where you've just said we will cover it next week, but I am red hot to pick up this game. I've just heard various people talk about it on various podcasts. It wasn't on my radar at all. Unky recommended it, and then I heard 2 others' recommendations. So it's got my ear without going into detail because we'll cover it next week, mate. But what is it that put you off it? What wasn't good?
Oh, it feels... just the gameplay loop hasn't got me, and it just, to me, feels like a pretty generic third-person game. Now, okay. I would imagine that if the gameplay loop got its hooks into you, I could see why you would spend a lot of time with it, and obviously the hooks are into Unky, so I can understand that. It's been, and again, without going too far into it, it's been described as like a Souls-like
that's what
third-person shooter. I would question that.
Okay.
I would question that description.
All right. Maybe I'll hold off until next week. Maybe I'll listen to you blokes flesh it out next week, and maybe I'll hold off my purchase until then. But still, tip of the cap to selling 1 million copies in 4 days. Does it by chance anywhere state whether the 1 million copies you would assume has recouped development costs and they're now sitting pretty from a budget standpoint?
Oh, look, I'd have to imagine that if the original one sold over 1 million in the first 6 months or so, that was given it greenlit for a sequel, that they would have made their money back on that. So I'd have to assume that the fact that they've sold that in 4 days, and you'd imagine it's going to probably double that in the next month or so, that they'd well and truly be in the black on that one, I would have thought.
Fantastic. I love it. Sorry, final question before we move on, mate. What did it set you back for the physical copy here in Australia?
80.
80. Okay. So full price game. Very good. All right, then. A story for this evening. Patapon. What's happening in the land of the Patapons?
Patapon. I jumped the gun a little bit on this one, so I'll try and repronounce it now that I've had a look at it. It's Ratatan. I think Ratatan. Still can't get it right. Was a... up for Kickstarter as a spiritual successor to Patapon, which was, as I mentioned before, a PlayStation 1 game, and it has reached its goals inside of 24 hours. They were looking for originally 523,000, so just over $500,000 US, and they are up to 450,000, nice. So just shy of what they were after. So I'm not sure whether you've put a heck of a lot of time into the original Patapon on the PlayStation, but obviously a bit of a rhythm-based game there. Was not one that I really spent any time with at all, Troy.
Yes. No, I played the bejesus out of Patapon 1 and Patapon 2, and I believe both are available as part of the upper tiers of PlayStation Plus in a backwards compatibility sense in the old full library there. So if you're yet to check them out yourself, or you want a refresher and you've got a PS Plus Deluxe, I want to say to you need in Australia, you can dive backwards and check them out at no extra cost. And yes, as you said, Billy, I'm a big music rhythm game fan, and Bon, Bata Bon. I absolutely loved it and put hours into it. You know me, I love parroting back what I hear. Shout out again to Double Dragon Gaiden. Those guys have nailed that. But yeah, I absolutely love music rhythm games. I love me some Patapon. And if I used which service is it? It's the crowdfunding one. I'm blanking on its name now. Kickstarter. Thank you. If I used Kickstarter, I would have been very interested in this. However, I don't go in for the old Kickstarters, but fantastic. Sign me up. I cannot wait to go hands-on whenever they release it. Have they sort of indicated a release window at all, or are they just putting the hand out?
No, just putting the hand out at this stage. It's still got about a month or so left of the crowdfunding. So I'd imagine once they get their pockets filled, that they will come out with a bit more information in terms of development schedule and that sort of stuff, and then hopefully a release date at that point.
My wild guess would be Chrissy 2025 is when I'll set my hopes for going hands-on with this one at release. All right, story 5 this evening. Oh, now I love a bit of this. Over to you, Billy. What's happening here?
Well, there's a bit of someone spoke out of turn. So Hasbro, the developers or the owners of Transformers, were doing a bit of a rundown on some of their IP during the week, and had mentioned in the wake of Microsoft purchasing, or in the final throes of purchasing Activision, that they would hope that the Transformers games would make their way, or the older Transformers games would make their way over to Game Pass. And one of the Hasbro representatives, for some reason, decided to come out and say that Activision had lost all their game data on their hard drives.
He was responding to a question at Comic-Con, is my understanding.
Oh, there you go. So, and then they've come out and said a couple of days later, no, they haven't lost it. We've spoken to Activision and they still have it. So
no, what really happened is Bobby picked up the phone and said, if you boys ever want another paycheck from Activision, you're going to retract that immediately. Hung up.
Well, but I suppose at the end of the day, the bonus is that they're still there, and hopefully they'll come to Game Pass. So that was, that's one of the things that I've sort of been keen on. We know all the big IP that will cross over to Microsoft, when we talk about Call of Duty and all of that sort of stuff. But one of the things that's interested me, Activision have got some massive IP and a lot of IP that really hasn't been used a lot in the last sort of 10 or 15 years. So it'd be interesting to see, what games come across or that they can bring across to Game Pass as a straight port across, or alternatively, how far they delve back into that Activision catalogue and then say, okay, well, we've got Transformers. Let's make a new Transformers game. We've got, there was actually one I heard someone talking about the other day, and I can't remember. It was a prototype or something. Prototype on the PS3 and Xbox 360
that was a game back then, but I'm not sure
it was almost a knockoff of Spider-Man to some degree, but Activision have got that as well. So whether they can bring that across and revive that, so there's a heap of IP that is available that, I think is right for Game Pass, because if you're looking at not that AAA tier, which is not really what we're getting at the moment, we get the occasional one, but a lot of it's your sort of A or B tier games, and there's a lot of that stuff in the Activision back catalogue that I think would be fantastic for Game Pass, just to jump in, either relive some old memories or see what they've done in terms of updates or new releases and all the rest of it. And it's not something that you're gonna spend hours and hours on, but it's great to jump in and have a look. So
yeah, I expect we're going to see so many marketing experiments take place once the Activision purchase has been completed. I reckon they'll start to go into the back catalogue, like the next time a Transformers movie comes out, they might roll out one or two of the old 360 or original Xbox Transformers games. And I reckon they will take what is the interest on Game Pass, like how many millions of players are jumping on these old games the day they go up or the week or whatever, and then judging on how many people jump in to play them. I reckon that's going to lead on to green lighting the new version. Okay, there is clearly interest amongst the gamers out there. People are jumping on these old Transformers games, green light the next new Transformers games, set the budget accordingly. So I see nothing but a bright future for Xbox Game Pass once this deal goes through. And very much to your point, man, there is such a big back catalogue, and Hasbro Transformers is the tip of the iceberg stuff. I'm so stoked. I can't wait for this to all come to pass.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing with it is if they can
Game Pass,
if they can start bringing back a lot of this stuff as well, like for me as a physical collector, I'd always rather the physical version. But some of this stuff is getting harder and harder to find, and when you can find it, it's extremely expensive. You're looking at in some cases paying the same cost that you would have paid 10, 15 years ago for a new game, or in other cases you're looking at double and triple the price. So the fact that they can bring these back, I think for me as a collector is a good thing as well, because hopefully if they're widely available on Game Pass or on PlayStation services and even Nintendo's to a lesser degree, hopefully that will then see the physical version prices drop as well, because they're now more widely available than just going out and finding the physical version because you can't get anywhere else.
I was thinking it was going to go the other way, man. I was thinking your collection was going to spike in value. People will be like, oh, I forgot how good this game was. I better rush out and get the final physical copies that are available. I could see it going the other way, and suddenly your collection's worth a lot more as they become available in Game Pass and it piques people's interest. I reckon you'll expose it to a new audience, and some of those new audience will be collectors and they'll be out there. Right, where's the physical copy?
Well, I suppose the only problem with that is, I'm not looking to sell, so I'm only looking at bringing new stuff in, so it's not good for me if the prices go up.
Well, you better get busy, mate. Go out and go on a shopping spree before Xbox's check clears.
Oh, I've only got a couple of months. We'll have to see how we go.
Good luck to you, sir. All right, story quick math 6 this evening. Oh my goodness. Now, not only am I excited for this, my missus is pricked up because she has spent a lot of time here. Bully, what's this story got for us?
Well, the rumour, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. So for those that aren't aware, the follow-up Skyrim that was released in 2011 is not the first one on modern consoles. It was Oblivion that came out. Basically, it was almost release window game for the Xbox 360. And the first time, I think this was the first game I actually played on the 360 when I got it. And without spoiling too much of it, you start off in a dungeon. By the time you make your way out of your dungeon into the open world, and you can see the greenery of the trees and the mountains and the hills and the blue sky, and you're looking out across a big lake. That was one of the most amazing next-gen experiences I've ever had in video games, is coming out of that dungeon and just sitting there going, wow, how good does this look? Obviously, we're talking almost 2 decades later. If you were to fire it up, it'd look quite horrendous, I would have thought. But the fact that we're hopefully getting a remake of it, and if they can update those visuals, because it was a fantastic game, for an RPG and something that we of that sort of scale and size and depth of systems we really hadn't seen outside of PC, really. To that degree. So the fact that they were able to bring it over, and if they can update the graphical style, I'd be 100%. I'd be jumping back into it day one.
Yeah, mate. I had a little squiz at this story, and it's saying that they're going to use the Unreal Engine 5 for the visual side of it, but they're using the original engine to run all the underlying, game mechanics and everything. But physics and graphics will be handled by Unreal Engine 5, so it should look amazing, yet play, as we recall it. So sign me up. I cannot wait. I know I spent over 200 hours in this back on the 360, and yes, one of my, 4 360s red ringed while playing Oblivion.
Did you wrap it in the towel to keep it going?
No, I took it back and Unky Dunky sorted me out.
I think mine was way past the use by date by that point, and I got as much wrung as much life as I could with the slightly damp towel wrapped around with it. It got me another 3 or 4 weeks use out of it before the board just completely snapped and cracked, and that was the end of it.
I love it, but yeah, I'm a huge Oblivion fan, so me and the missus will be fighting each other for screen time when this finally assumably comes out. I'm so excited for this one. Sign me up. Speaking of games to be excited for the re-emergence, what's story 7, mate?
Well, Red Dead Redemption. So their logos somehow appeared, and somehow appeared on the Rockstar website. So the fair bit of conjecture about what that means as to whether we are looking at a long rumored remake of the original, or whether hopefully we are looking at a new one. But probably much to my chagrin, well, I shouldn't say chagrin, because I'd be happy with a remake of the original. It was a classic game and a fantastic game, but it looks like the original was reclassified in South Korea by their game rating board. And for those that don't know, that's a fairly good indication that it's going to be being released in the next 6 to 12 months once it's rated by the South Korean board, who, I don't know, someone has to do some work in there because they just leak like a sieve.
No, they are doing fantastic work. I appreciate their leaks. They're one of the very reliable sources of the hot tip. Now, do you by chance have a tinfoil hat handy there, Bully?
Oh, I'm sure I could get up. Yeah, as I do. Just that the funny one is, you know what's the other one that's actually been coming out lately in terms of leaks out of their game rating board is, of all places, South Africa.
Oh, really? Hey, there's my tinfoil cat. Now, Bully, I'm going to speculate here wildly. I reckon this is story DLC for Red Dead Redemption 2. I don't know if you remember, mate, but the entirety of Red Dead Redemption 1's map, the whole in-world geography that's required for Red Dead Redemption, exists already in Red Dead Redemption 2. So Tinfoil Hat Troy says that this will actually be story DLC for Red Dead Redemption 2, and they are going to spike the sales on Red Dead Redemption 2 by releasing Red Dead Redemption, the original story, as game DLC for Red Dead Redemption 2. How does that strike you, my friend?
Well, I would be hoping it's more than just DLC, and I think it's probably. I think I've said in the past that in terms of DLC, I'm not a massive fan of it anyway, because generally it releases 6, 12, 18 months after the original games come out. And in this
what are
case,
we now, like 5 years?
Well, we're 5 years at the moment, so if it comes out sometime in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll be looking at 6 years in between the release and DLC, which is mildly absurd. Just give us a new game. I don't care whether it's Red Dead 3 or whether it's a remake of number 1. I'd replay that day one as well. So whichever way they do it, as long as it's a big meaty package, as we've seen with those games, and maybe you get the Undead Nightmare thrown in as well for a remake of the original.
Now, the final bit of fuel I'll throw on the fire, mate, is that, I don't know if you're aware, but if you play Red Dead Redemption 2 now on the Xbox Series X, you've got all the backwards compat upscale. You've got the 4K, you've got the 60 frames a second, and you've got the HDR. Xbox Series X is the place to play Red Dead Redemption 2, shy of a PC, obviously. But in PlayStation land, you're stuck on PS4 and it's 30 and there's no HDR and it's the not good version. So tinfoil hat a little bit tighter. I reckon we're going to see, with all the benefits that we've had now on Xbox Series X for some time, I reckon that'll jump over. That'll be the version that comes onto the PS5. It'll bring the PS5 and the Xbox Series X into parity, and I reckon it's going to be DLC. That's my tinfoil hat. And enough of that. Moving on. What's the final story this evening, mate?
Well, the final story, and we had released this week, was the Twisted Metal TV series, which, to be honest, came out of nowhere at the start of the year when they announced that it was coming. I think they got rather excited off the Last of Us TV show, and then they started, what else can we throw out there? And I think most people, when we heard the announcement, were, what are you thinking? There is no way this can be any good. I jumped onto it last night, watched the first 3.5 episodes, and surprisingly, it's actually pretty good. It's not Last of Us caliber, but it is actually a pretty good showing.
Yeah, a little inside scoop here, but Unky Dunky's given it the big 2 thumbs up as well. And as we've said earlier tonight, he will be back next week. So it'll be all 3 of us back on the show next week. And given that both you and Unky have sung the praises of the old Twisted Metal TV show, I'm going to redeem my code for Stan that they've been cramming down my inbox now for weeks. We've extended the period that you can redeem it. Go on, redeem the code, will you? So I think Stan's desperately looking for subscribers to come back. So You're going to redeem the code. And now, mate, I'm not sure about this. You'll have to tell me. Did they drop every episode? Was it 10 episodes? And did they drop them all at once? Or is it a drip feed? Am I going to miss some?
Oh, look, I haven't seen if they've done the whole lot, but I've certainly, every time it's got to the end of one episode, it just reels up the next one and says, yep, ready to go. So I'd assume it's the whole lot in one kick. But it's quite funny. I know we've spoken in the past about the critical rating, from journalists rating video games, and it seems they're a little out of whack again. So we pull a story off of Rotten Tomatoes, who was saying that the critical view rating for the show is at 65%, which is not bad. But the audience score, so the general
ratings,
general mug that's actually sitting there watching it is giving it a 91 overall. So a massive difference there in between the two, which again just shows how, in my opinion, how out of kilter critics are in terms of what they think is a good product and what the fan base and the community and ultimately the paying audience are prepared to sit and watch. So another one for them.
Fantastic. So everyone out there, if you're curious about our thoughts, come back next Thursday, 8 p.m. Myself, Bully Hunky Dunky, will rip in to Twisted Metal TV show. Fingers crossed if they're available. Hopefully I'll have gone through all 10. I'm not sure about you, Bully. Do you reckon you'll steamroll the rest of the season if they're available, or are you sort of going to cool off?
No, I reckon I'll keep going. It's certainly, what I say, of three and a half of the episodes in, so I'm almost halfway through. I'll push through.
Nice one. All right, so next week, everyone come back and you'll hear all our thoughts on the Twisted Metal TV show, but fantastic showing, and I love to hear the users out there love it. All right, as we always do, the news segment is finished by going over to the lovely people over at Game Informer for this week's game releases. They're on screen. Over to you, Bully.
So not a heck of a lot coming out, and not a lot of interest other than one game, which we'll get to down the bottom. But F1 Manager 23 came out on July 31st, so a couple of days ago. For anyone that's big into that one, certainly doesn't tickle me. We've got Venba that came out on the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, S, and 1, which is funny it didn't come out on the PS4 if it's come out on the Xbox One and the PC. Come out July 31, and that is a Game Pass game. You've got Colossal Cave on the Xbox Series and Xbox One consoles August 1st, so a couple of days ago, which my understanding is, and I just sort of try and have a quick look at it through because I didn't know anything about it, but it looks like it's a reimagining of an old text-based game from the 1970s with some VR elements as well. So, and getting some pretty good reviews, 8 from Game Informer it is getting. So that might be one to have a look at. You've got...
Sorry, did you say, was that Game Pass, did you say?
Don't believe that's on Game Pass, no. The previous one was Venba.
Very good. Sorry, mate.
You've got Rhythmos on Android August 1st. Nobody cares, although it's got a decent rating of 8.5 if gaming on a tiny little screen is your thing. And the biggest one of the week would be Baldur's Gate 3, which is released currently on the PC on August 3, so released today. I'm really keen to jump into this one, but not a big PC gamer. I think it comes out on the PlayStation in about 3 or 4 weeks' time, and we are still waiting on a release release date for the Xbox. But from what I've seen, it looks amazing. A turn-based classical CRPG type game with some strange bestiality concepts.
I've heard some things. Sorry, and just quickly, what's your history of the franchise? You've played 1 and 2, have you?
Played 1 and 2, but not for 25 years. I haven't been a big PC gamer since the late 90s, so it's probably that far ago, and I can't really remember a heck of a lot about it. But I'd be keen to jump in and have a look.
Very good, mate. Fair enough. I am keen as well. I've heard some things. It's perked my ears up. I'll definitely be interested. But that does it for the news this evening. So we're off to everyone's favorite segment. Who will fight?
Who will fight?
Now, Bully, if you can, please remind us, what are the constraints of the standoff this evening, sir?
Well, as per our first gaming discussion for the evening, Disney's Illusion Island out this week. So we ask, what is the best Disney video game that you can play?
Very good. And first up on screen, we have Disney's Dreamlight Valley. It didn't do a whole lot for me, but if memory serves, Billy, you're a big fan.
It's one of those ones that I put, I reckon, probably 15 to 20 hours into it when it first came out, and was sort of holding off because you could see they had a release roadmap of all these extra IP that were going to get thrown into it. But the easiest way to describe it is it's like Animal Crossing, I guess, is probably the best way to describe it. You get given some tasks, you got to run around, pick fruit, collect items, and basically rebuild the Disney town. And then it starts off with a couple of IP that you've got in there, like Ratatouille, and I think that was one of the first ones that was released with it. But then it's gradually over the last 12 months has just got more and more IP thrown into the game. So you've got, The Lion King, you've got Frozen, and it just goes on and on, Little Mermaid, all that sort of stuff. So
can I ask you, mate, I believe, if memory serves, and I could be way off on this one, but if memory serves, about a month after release, they announced some massive amount of revenue off this game. Is that right? Do you remember that they, about a month after release, was, this is a real winner for us? Hello.
Oh, look, I can't recall, but it wouldn't surprise me because I think it's still available on Game Pass for free, but the other consoles you had to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So on the PlayStation you have to buy it, and then each additional IP pack or story pack, you're paying for it on top of that. So if you're into these games, and I spoke about it when we were talking about Illusion Island, is Disney is a universally loved IP, and they're not, yes, it appeals to kids, but it also has that nostalgia thing. Like, I don't know how you sit with it, Troy, but certainly for me, I love all the old, Disney cartoons that I grew up with watching as a kid. I still love them now as an adult.
Saturday morning Disney.
Yeah, and having all that IP thrown in there in one huge hit. And I've always been a bit of a fan of those, sort of relaxing, you're not having to fight enemies and run around, and you can just sort of make your own way around and do what you want. If you want to do this task, you go and do it. If you want to, go and pick berries, you go and pick berries. If you want to explore an area, you do that. So you can you sort of just do whatever you want, and it's got all those characters into it. I'm really a big fan of it, and as I said, it's been on my backlog list again for a good 6 months to get back into it and see what it's like now that they've got all that extra IP released.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Yeah, it wasn't a game for me. I checked it out, but I totally know. And if memory serves, Unky was a big fan as well. You were both lit up by it. And so good on them. Hats off. Well played, Disney Dreamlight Valley. Entrant number 2 this week, Bully?
Entrant number 2, Kingdom Hearts, that we've got. I'll say it incorporates the whole gamut of games that they've got available for Kingdom Hearts. So you've got 1, 2, and 3 are the main lines, and then you've got about half a dozen spin-offs, and then within that you've got 1.5, 2.5, that's have variations on how it all works. But in terms of an RPG, melting together the Square Enix style RPG with the Disney characters again, for me, that's back when the original released in the early 2000s, that was what really drew me into it, was the fact that you could play a Square RPG with Disney characters. But the only caveat I'll say on that is whereas you can sit down and watch a Disney story and you can almost you could almost work out from the get-go what the story beat is going to be from scene to scene. The story in Kingdom Hearts is mind-melting, to say the least. There is, different characters that are overseeing this, and then there's other ones out the side here, and then there's, various offshoots and people who are pretending to be other people, and it unless you've played each and every one of them and you've paid attention 100%, I would suggest go and watch a YouTube video on the story of it if you want to wrap your head around it.
I'm neither of those, mate. I've never gotten into. I tried Kingdom Hearts 2, or which one of them came out on. I can't even remember now whether it was Game Pass or PlayStation Plus. Before Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, I remember number 2 got released somewhere, and I tried to put 5 minutes into it, and it was an instant no for me. But my question is, from what you said, it sounds a little bit Metal Gear Solid, Kojima storytelling. Would that be reasonable?
Probably worse than that. I'm telling you, I have played 1 and 2. I have played through 3 times each, and I've played number 3 once through to the end, and I could not tell you what's going on in that game.
Fantastic. All right, then. That brings us to number 3. Woo! DuckTales. Woo!
DuckTales. Now, I don't know if you played the original back on the NES, Troy, but it was a great game on the NES, and then they went ahead and did the remastered version on the PlayStation 3. And as a physical collector, I can say this is outrageously expensive to try and get it on the PlayStation 3 these days. I think you're looking north of 150 to 200.
Whoa!
To try and get a copy of that. That's Australian, so I think I don't know what the prices are US, but you'd be looking at well over 100 US for it.
I like the way you sunk your comment then up with Scrooge McDuck in his vault full of money.
Well, give me some of that money and then I can go and buy it. The original was a fantastic game, and the remake here is not only does it justice, but it actually looks, the graphical style that you got out there in the NES, it is what it is for the time, but this actually looks like a proper Disney cartoon. And you mentioned it before where the Saturday morning Disney, and you'd sit there for 3 or 4 hours of a morning as a kid watching all the cartoons. Well, this is like watching a cartoon, but you've got, full control over Scrooge McDuck and all the characters.
Yeah, I absolutely love DuckTales. Back in the day, as you said on the NES, man, I couldn't even ballpark for you how many hours I dropped into it. Huge fan. I would love a re-release. Is it available on the modern consoles at all?
No, there was a licensing issue, as is to my understanding, which is quite often the case with digital games, which is one of the reasons why I go physical where I can, just because you never know when that licensing agreements will run out, or there's issues with that sort of stuff. So no, you can't get it on any of the current consoles, unfortunately.
Oh, well, come on, Phil Spencer, fire up that back compat program again. Let's get that to happen. All right, entrant 4 this week. Now, I think this might actually be available in Game Pass, isn't it?
You're going to make me go and have a look now. Epic Mickey, that was originally released on the Wii console, and then I don't think the original ever got a release on the PS3 or Xbox 360. It was.
I thought there was a 360 back compat version of this in Game Pass currently.
I'd have to have a look, but it did. I know they did release Epic Mickey 2 that came out on those consoles, so that might be the one. But the original itself was a Wii only game, as is to my memory stands. And if anybody in the comments knows otherwise, certainly jump in and call me out on that one. But
no, I reckon you picked it like a snotty nose. I reckon it's Epic Mickey 2 I'm thinking of in Game Pass back compat. Sorry, mate, keep going.
Yeah, and a bit of a different one, this one. So it's a bit of a 3D platformer to some degree, but a lot of the movement and the abilities that you've got come through a brush of repainting the world, and that's sort of your weapon as you work through the world. So basically reanimating and reinvigorating the world with your paintbrush, and that's how you sort of go through it. And I think the second one, you actually could use it was a co-op game as well, so you had another character that you could jump in and play with you as well. But I didn't stick a hell of a lot of time into it. I don't know if you put any time into it, Troy.
Yeah, well, I can say it's definitely a 2-player game, because me and my son had sat down and put easy 8, maybe 10 hours into. And you're right, mate. It's Epic Mickey 2. On the backwards compat program, but we've absolutely loved our time with it. And it was my first experience playing Epic Mickey 2. Maybe it was over these Christmas holidays. It wasn't that long, 6-8 months ago was the first time going hands-on with it. But it reminded me, and I know I've got this backwards in respect to which way they came out, but it reminded me of the Unfinished Swan. I don't know if you ever played that one. I think that was a PS3 exclusive, I want to say. But you're right. It does to a degree, yeah. Yeah, so I played and finished Unfinished Swan. I love that. And then I was playing this, and I'm like, this is where they must have got the inspiration for Unfinished Swan. That's, very much there's invisible items in the world, throw the paintbrush over it. There it is. Oh, now we finally understand it, push forward. And, but yeah, I highly recommend this one. If you've got young kids, especially if they love Disney as my boys do. But yeah, me and the son have put, as I said, 8 to 10 hours into this fantastic co-op game, Epic Mickey 2. Shout out to that game. All right. fifth entrant this week, Bully.
Fifth entrant, and this is probably cheating a little bit, much like we did with Kingdom Hearts, but the Disney Classic Collection. So on one disc released for the previous gen, so PS4 and Xbox One, but obviously still playable on the current gen. The collection contains the Aladdin variations from the SNES and Mega Drive, along with the Lion King, and there's a newly updated version as well that had the Jungle Book in it as well. So for those that aren't aware, each and it's probably hard to imagine now, but can you imagine? We get Red Dead Redemption on Xbox and PlayStation, but they're two entirely different games. It'd be hard to imagine but this is exactly what it was. So the SNES and the Mega Drive or Genesis version, depending on where you're from, were completely different games. They, you could play through one and then play through the other and get an entirely different experience. And it depends on which you played, because I think if memory serves, the Mega Drive or Genesis version of Aladdin was the superior one, but the SNES version of the Lion King and maybe the Jungle Book was the better one. But you get each version on that, and then you get some of the the modern convenience as well. So you get save states and rewind abilities and that sort of stuff. Which is,
do they do the full 16:9, or is it 4:3 with a bit of artwork on the side?
Oh, I think from memory, when I played through it, you can do. You can choose what you want. So you can either stretch the image out somewhat, or you can do it in the original format with the sort of border down the side. So you've got either option there. But as I was going to say, with the save states and the rewind feature, it's probably unless you want to get yourself into a frenzy, because the Lion King, especially on the SNES version, was what is widely considered one of the most difficult games on the SNES in terms of platforming. And you need that rewind feature to help you get through that. Otherwise, you'll be much like me, tearing out what little hair you have left.
The only curveball I'll throw at you, mate, is I played both of these games back in the day on PC. May have been DOS. I don't remember exactly, but it was either within Windows or it was a DOS PC version of Aladdin and the Lion King, but I don't know if they're the same version, because I didn't realize, to your point, what you were just saying, that there was different regions has different versions. So I don't even know if I've played these ones, but I certainly remember, I want to say it was like 94, 95, somewhere around there, playing the PC version. And I loved both of these games back then. They were fantastic.
Yeah, I just find it funny because I just can't, for anyone that didn't grow up in that era, that the idea of having a game with the same name that is just completely different depending on what console you're playing on. For anyone that never lived through that is mind-boggling, I would have thought.
Well, yeah, and it reminds me of the, and I'm going to have to throw to you for the specifics on this, but the Final Fantasies, didn't they get renumbered as they came out over here versus their original release?
Yeah, so I think Final Fantasy 3 on the SNES is actually Final Fantasy 6 in the actual proper numbered sequence.
Yeah.
So they're all out of whack, but that's another thing from back in the days, because as the term comes, JRPG comes from Japan, and the only way to get them across here in a lot of cases was localization of the before we had voice recording and all that. They had to go through and rewrite all the Japanese text into English text, and depending on who was doing it, it's quite humorous. In some games, you see the translations that they've got, and it just makes no sense, but because they didn't know exactly what they were talking about. But there's quite a few games like that we either didn't get the version of it in the West, or we did get a version of it, but it was renamed or renumbered. And there's games that we would look at and say, oh, that's the name of this. And if you said it to someone in Japan, they'd look at you like you'd lost the plot. And one of the classic ones is most people would know Resident Evil, but it's called Biohazard in Japan. Just as a point of difference, I guess.
Yeah, that's wild, man. All right. That is the 5 entrants we have for the evening as we discuss it now. Anybody watching live in their YouTube chat, please throw your winner into that chat so we can round it up. But, Bully, which way are you leaning from the 5? I'll just quickly run down the list again for anybody watching. Disney's Dreamlight Valley, Kingdom Hearts, DuckTales, Epic Mickey, and Disney Classic Collection. Bully, where's your heart lying?
Oh, there's only one place my heart's lying, and that's with the Kingdom Hearts.
Oh dear.
Just the amount of time that I have put into these games, I've really enjoyed it every time I've gone back. And I've gone, as I said, I've played through 1 and 2 probably 3 or 4 times, and maybe once every 5 or 6 years I jump back into them and replay them, which is more than I can say for many games across my gaming journey. But certainly the amount of time and effort and that I've put into it, and it's as I said when we were running through them, it's a perfect melding of Square Enix RPG sensibilities with the IP of Disney. So that's probably where I'd be at.
Fair enough, man. Well, unfortunately, there's only 2 of us this evening. I, as I already said, I'm not a Kingdom Hearts fan, so I can't back you there. And I think I may have tilted my hat a little earlier, but for me, it's got to be Epic Mickey. I've had such a fantastic time with my young kids and playing Epic Mickey, so that's where I'm sitting. So, Bully, I don't know if Unky's on the line, if he's shot you an SMS by chance, or whether somebody in their YouTube chat has by chance thrown their hat in the ring and can help break the tie.
Well, I've got one that's thrown his hat into the ring, Tigaro, and he's thrown it in my direction for Kingdom Hearts. He's telling me it's a clear Standoff winner.
Perfect. There we have it. Kingdom Hearts, a winner, and Bully and Tagaro, a winner is all 3 of you this evening. Well played, boys. Fair effort, Tagaro. Welcome back, sir. Thank you for joining us this evening. I love it. So, Kingdom Hearts, a winner is you for this week's Standoff, which brings us to segment 4, Bully, audience integration. Tell me, my friend, what's been happening in their YouTube chat this evening?
Well, as I said, we had Tigaro in there. I think he might be at work because he jumped in, said a quick g'day, threw his weight behind Kingdom Hearts, and then had to jump out. So
fair enough.
Hopefully he can catch up with the show a bit later. We've also had Eric Tate in there, and he's keen because he's getting ready for his new TV to be delivered today. So hopefully you can get some good gaming hooked up to that one, Eric. But that's short and sharp there for the chat today.
Fantastic work. Thank you very much. That will do it for another episode of the Gaming Enforcement Agency. We are Bully, fantastic showing you this evening, mate. Thank you very much for taking up the mantle and running us through the new segment, the Standoff. Excellent work, mate. Thank you, and welcome back post hiatus.
Thank you very much. And you've actually got my juices flowing for a Disney game, so I'm going to have to pick one of those and jump into it after the show.
Perfect. Well, I recommend Epic Mickey 2 on Game Pass. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in to the Gaming Enforcement Agency. Of course, we'll be back 8 p.m. next Thursday. As we've already said, Unky Dunky will join us. It'll be the original 3 back in full force next week. Of course, we'll have Let's Installs popping up on the channel between now and then. But, Bully, what else could you do with Geek Aloud?
Like it, subscribe it. You'll never miss it.
Oh, that was luck. Hey, that's something. Old Uncle Donkey. Gee, Donkey.